Chapter 15, Information. So this week we're going to be looking at the wide-ranging topic of data, and more specifically information that is derived from data. There's a lot of information about information, and actually a lot of disinformation about information. And we're going to talk about all that. This really comes down to the whole reason why IT exists. I had mentioned in a previous lecture that, we're all about application delivery, and that's absolutely true. Our users, our customers, they don't care about our tricked out servers, cutting edge technology, the fact that you're certified and all this different stuff. They couldn't care less. What they do care about is that their application works when they click on the icon, right? Or that some business process is being driven by the application that we're providing. Well, applications generally deal with information, either the dissemination of information, the collecting of information, or both. So let's take a look at it. Now, I use here in a minute, I use terms like data and information, and a lot of times we tend to think of these synonymously, but there actually is a difference. And we have the DIKW hierarchy, and it actually follows a little path here. At the bottom of the hierarchy, or in its most raw form, we have data. Now, these are direct signals. This is raw information. So, for example, I have a wireless thermometer outside my office door, and I've got a little digital readout for it here on my desk. The signal coming from that sensor to my little readout screen is data. It's saying exactly what that temperature is, this morning. In fact, this morning it was 45 degrees. Again, data, raw information, or just raw signals. Now, data by itself doesn't do us a whole lot. If I get a number like 45, what does that tell me? Right? 45 what? 45 degrees, 45 feet high, 45 minutes after the hour, what? So data must be processed and turned into some kind of a useful form that we can act on. And once data has been processed, it goes from being raw to information. So my temperature readout, 45, gets put into the context of degrees. In this case, degrees Fahrenheit. Okay. Now I have some information from that. I can process it even further by saying that, by looking at the clock measurement next to it, saying, okay, at 9 o'clock in the morning, the temperature was 45 degrees. There is information. Now I can turn around and take that information and apply it to something, and this becomes knowledge. For example, it's a knowledge that if I need to go out and work in my yard this morning, I'm going to probably want to put a coat on. Yep, I'm going to have some practical implementation of that information. And then, of course, we have wisdom, right? And this is just the experience of it. This is the fact that I can look at information over time and draw conclusions from it. I can gain experience from it. This is actually in April as we're filming this. So I know that around the middle of April, around tax time, it's going to be chilly in the morning. I'm going to need to put a coat on, more than likely. So it's no different in our data centers, right? Our data can be survey data, sales data, whatever coming in, which then gets processed into information and then gets applied in the form of knowledge. Now, I gave you an example of data, and a temperature reading. Well, that's not a whole lot of data, right? What we do nowadays, though, is we have to think in terms of big data, right? Because here's the thing: as organizations, companies, they're all about downsizing if they're economically required to. They'll downsize staffs, they'll close locations, they'll reorganize, eliminate inventory, and so forth. One thing they almost never get rid of, though, is their data. Right? So this is one thing we can just plan on. Data will continue to come in. It starts big, and it gets even bigger from there. And as time goes on, we'll have more and more data to have to deal with. And this is a major concern of IT, right? As information technology, we have to decide how we're going to store it. How are we going to move it around? How are we going to take that raw data and process it and turn it into useful information? How are we going to present it? How are our users and our customers going to access it? How are we going to protect it? These are all things that are driving factors from IT. And it says right here, and I can't stress this enough, these are business, not technology decisions. Information technology is a business function. Our program would easily fit inside a business program at a university, and in some places they do, because we are business drivers. Before I jump too much into databases, I'm actually going to hop back up here, and we're going to look at one last thing. And we can categorize data, and information for that matter, in two broad categories. And we can consider these structured and unstructured. Unstructured data is just a mishmash of all different kinds of things. It's just massive collections of Word documents and Excel spreadsheets and PowerPoints and you name it. It's kind of analogous to that drawer I have up in my kitchen. I got a couple drawers in my kitchen, right? Hopefully. One of my drawers is the junk drawer. I think everyone has one of these. And anything is in there. You open that drawer up, there's everything from paper clips to toothpicks to Post-it notes to broken pencils, whatever. It's all kinds of stuff tends to go in there. That represents unstructured data. Unstructured data is very hard to manage. It's very hard to search through. It's not indexed usually in any way. It's just a collection of stuff. I don't even know what's in my drawer. Every now and again, when it gets too full for me to close, I dump it out and I sort through it and go, oh yeah, I forgot I had that. A letter opener. I could have really used that. I don't even know what's in there. Well, we do the same thing with data. And unstructured data, which by the way represents the majority of the data that's out there and the data that we as IT people have to manage, is very difficult to search. And a lot of times we don't even know what's in there. All we know is we need to keep it. On the other side of the coin, we have structured data. Now, structured data is like that drawer in my kitchen that has that little tray in there that holds my forks, spoons, knives, and any little corn on the cob eaters or whatever. It's categorized, right? They're different shapes. I got a little spoon-shaped thing for teaspoons. I got a bigger spoon-shaped thing for tablespoons. I got a fork-shaped hole for the forks and a place for the knives. There's no question what's in that drawer. Right? I know what's in there. I know I got my 4 eating utensils, and I can readily find them because they're categorized, because they're indexed and placed in a certain place in a certain order per certain rules. Well, that's what databases do. So data stored in a database can be considered structured data, and this is huge. Structured data stored in databases, we can search on, we can find it, we can run queries on it, we can process it more easily. Again, unfortunately, this makes up very little of the data that's out there, but it is by far the easiest type of data to manage. Now, databases take all kinds of shapes and forms. We've got desktop database products like Microsoft Access. We have big enterprise class databases like Oracle or Microsoft SQL Server. We even have open source databases, ones that are free. You can go out there and download them, which are totally enterprise though. Things like MySQL. So databases are everywhere. They tend to be the back end to a lot of applications that we use every day. Right? I mean, Microsoft Exchange for email is actually a database-driven structure. Every time you go out to Amazon to buy something and you start putting stuff in your shopping cart, well, that's a database behind that. A lot of our online stuff is database-driven. Microsoft SharePoint is SQL Server-driven. Lots and lots and lots of applications for databases. Now, databases, there's also different types of them. right? We have the modern databases we use are known as relational databases. And most, if not all, current database implementations are these. They're relational, which means they're based on the idea of tables that hold a certain type of data. And then within those tables, you have fields, which gives you specific data. And then within those, you have key fields. And it's these key fields that linked the tables together and effectively form indexes. So I mean, look at my little example right here. I've got a table that says for products, and inside of that, I've got a product ID. That's going to be a unique value for each individual product, right? For, I don't know, frying pans or whatever. I got a product name. What is the name of the product? I got a description down here, and I have a price. But my key field is a product ID. My product names, I might have duplicates of those. I'm almost certainly going to have duplicate prices in there, but my product ID is identical. Come over to the table here on the right, and I have a customer table. Same idea. Customer ID, a unique value in this table that uniquely identifies every customer. Then the customer's name, address, city, state. Well, I'm going to have duplicates on this. I'm going to have more than one customer in Maine, I hope. I'm going to have more than one customer named John Smith, quite possibly. But I'll never have a customer with the two customers with the same customer ID, unique values. And then I can take these key fields and link them to other tables. Here's a sales table. See this? That is based on the unique customer ID, unique product ID, and then some additional data points like quantity sold and when it was sold. A relational database like this allows me to track large amounts of information. And that's the whole point behind it. Now that was just a little example right there. This is a more reasonably sized database, and even this is just off of Access. This is off of a desktop system. It's still tiny. Right? This guy's got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tables. Enterprise databases can have hundreds or thousands of tables all linked together. This is the job of the database administrator, the DBA, designing this, maintaining it, and tuning it. There's a whole discipline out there called database normalization, where you're trying to make these tables and these relationships as efficient as possible. And that can be a full-time job. That can be an entire career right there. So we have all this data. We have all this information that we're deriving from the data. How do we protect it? How do we, it has value. It has value to organizations, to customers, personal data, your sales data. I wouldn't want Amazon releasing all of my home address and credit card information out to the rest of the world. That'd be kind of a bummer. I'm very interested in that they protect my information. Likewise, companies have proprietary information. They have trade secrets. They have information that is critical to their business that they must protect. Well, that's the job of information assurance and security, InfoSec, or as we're commonly calling it nowadays, cybersecurity. Now, there's a whole degree program in just this, right? And I'm trying to give it to you in like a slide. But in very general terms, information assurance and security is all about protecting our information and controlling how it's utilized. And it really has three primary goals. And you could look at it here as CIA. Confidentiality, meaning my private information is not being put out on the internet, right? So that's being protected. Integrity, making sure that that information is not being changed. I don't want my home address changed on Amazon's database. I go to order, I don't know, new guitar strings or something. I want them coming to my home address, not somebody over in Iowa or California. So the data the integrity must be maintained. It must be unchanged. And then, of course, availability. The data / the information must be available for use. I can have real secure data by putting it in a box, locking the box, and burying the box 50 feet underground, and then pouring concrete on top of it. More than likely, no one's going to get into that. That data will be confidential, it'll be safe, and it's probably not going to be changed, but it's not going to be very highly available. Information security means that you have to maintain the availability of it also. It must be usable. Now, one of the things that InfoSec does is it assesses risk. And there's a whole discipline here called risk management. We do this all the time. There's risk to everything we do. There's risk to getting out of bed in the morning. Well, the same idea holds as far as our IT infrastructures and the data that's inside there. There are risks to it. I mean, there's risk to our physical assets. Somebody could walk in and walk out with our servers, on their shoulders. They actually steal our stuff. Well, that's not good. Intellectual property, again, this proprietary data, this mission-critical, business-critical data that a company depends on, it needs to be able to protect that. Or just the information, right? Hacking in, like the Target data breach from a while back. Somebody going in, attacking an infrastructure, and stealing all these credit card numbers. They're all risks there. So what the InfoSec person does is assess these risks and figures out where the risk exists and to what degree of a risk it is. From that, you identify vulnerabilities. You figure out where your weak spots are. Do we have a risk to our physical assets? Well, we don't have a lock on the door. So yeah, we have a vulnerability right there. Somebody could just walk in. There's no barrier. And from that, we can identify our threats. And that's our threat right there. Somebody comes in, says, oh, nice computer, I think I'll steal it. No lock in the door, walk in, grab the computer, walk out, there you go. There goes your physical assets. Well, from that point, then you implement policies to deal with it. How can we improve our physical security? Well, I can put a lock on the door. I'll have a policy that says all our outside doors must be locked during the hours where business is closed. Okay, I've implemented a policy that mitigates this threat, which is based on the vulnerability of having unlocked doors, which can help protect my physical assets. And then, of course, you got to monitor it, right? It's one thing to put a policy out there and say, from now on, we're going to lock our doors, but if you don't enforce it, and nobody ever bothers to lock the door, having a lock on there does no good. So it's a process. It's a continuing process of reassessment and re-identifying vulnerabilities and threats, because this stuff changes. And we as IT people, as InfoSec people, have to stay on top of it and have to stay up to date. One other form of protection we have to think about also is disaster recovery. Now, disaster recovery has been around for a while, but it's only been in the last 15 years or so that it's really taken a front seat in the minds of IT. Part of this was, apathy previously, and part of it was expense. Disaster recovery deals with catastrophic failures. And I'm not just talking about a server failure or a disk failure or something like that. That's why we run backups. Disaster recovery deals with my building burning down. Right? What if I don't have a data center? What if it gets wiped off the face of the earth? Well, what do I do? That's where you have a DR plan. And these can scale largely. Right? We're talking about everything from your data center catching on fire to a hurricane coming through and destroying the city that your data center is in. Think that can't happen? Hurricane Katrina, 2005, nearly wiped New Orleans off the face of the earth. It can certainly happen. And it was those big-scale natural disasters from the early 2000s that really brought this to the forefront. That and the advent of virtualization and cloud services made disaster recovery affordable to pretty much everybody. So we have threats. We alluded to that a bit during our discussion on InfoSec. They take many, many forms. Okay, and I just mentioned a few of them. We have threats from disasters, from natural disasters, from fires, that kind of thing. We have other types of less natural disasters, stuff from human beings. Things like social engineering. Here's a common one. As human beings, we want to be helpful. That's something we do. We try to help everybody out. So it's not difficult or very far-fetched for someone to dress nicely, put on a suit, or business casual, polos and dockers, grab a briefcase, walk into a receptionist's office for some company and say, hey, I'm Bob from IT, and I'm here to work on your servers. Can you point to me where you keep your servers? And oh, by the way, I'm going to need your username and password so I can get in and fix it. And having that receptionist go, yeah, right here. Well, that happens a lot, believe it or not. Social engineering, just lying to people and hoping for the best. That's a training issue. That's something that needs to be dealt with policy administratively through companies, but it's very big. Phishing is related to that. Right? Getting an email saying, hey, congratulations, you just won $10 million in this lottery somewhere. Send me your social security number and bank account information so we can deposit the funds. Yeah, sounds legit. Phishing attacks. Then we actually have hacking attacks, things where people are actively attacking your system, protocol attacks. DOS is denial of service. I can sit there and ping your servers to the point where they can't respond to anything else. They're not going to do their job because I've got them busy doing something else. Software exploits. You going in and finding bugs in software and using those back doors to take control. Intrusion, and this can be physical intrusion, like we were talking about before, just forcing your way into your data center, not putting a lock on it, walking in. Insider attacks, disgruntled employees. That arguably, probably that's our biggest threat, our own employees. Somebody got fired, they're not happy, they want to get revenge on their company. It's totally illegal, but it's certainly plausible to think that it's something we have to protect against. Now, one of the ways we can protect this is by encrypting our data, right? And this is a discipline called cryptography. And this isn't just limited to the computing world. I mean, cryptography dates back centuries. The whole point of making it so somebody can't read your mail, finding some way of encrypting it, of putting it in a cipher. And you have to know the cipher to be able to read it. Well, this is that concept brought into the modern age. Lots of stuff dealing with cryptography. We could have an entire 16-week course on nothing but cryptography. Right? Just to quickly touch on it, there's really a couple ways we can do this in the computing world. We have we have private key encryption, public key encryption. Private key encryption is where I take some key and I encrypt a message with it, and then I need to use that same key to decrypt it. Well, it's the original type of encryption, right? And it can be one of the most secure methods of encryption because I can have very, very, very complex mathematical keys. What's one downside you think there is to that, though? Well, I have to have the key to decrypt it. If I'm transmitting data across the wire, you're in Maine, I'm in California, and I'm sending you data, how do I get the key to you? If I send the key and the key gets intercepted, now somebody can use that to decrypt my data. So private key encryption is still in use. It's still it's still the right fit for certain applications, but you have to think about that. How am I going to get the key from one point to another? How am I going to update my key? More commonly, especially in this age of e-commerce, we use what's called public key encryption. And this deals with a PKI infrastructure, public key infrastructure. It's where each entity communicating, they have two keys. You have a public key, which you share with the world. It's anyone can have it, you publish it. This is my public key. And then you have a private key. And that private key is a secret. You protect that above everything else. And the two are mathematically linked, right? You can derive the public key from the private key, but you can't go backwards. So here's how it would work. You're in Maine, I'm in California. I want to send you a encrypted message. Well, you make your public key available. Anyone can have it. So I go out, I get your public key, I download it. And then I turn around and I use your public key to encrypt a message with it. Well, the public key can encrypt the message, but it can't decrypt it. That's that mathematical relationship. Then I send you the encrypted message, and you use your secret private key to decrypt it. If you want to respond back to me, you go out and get my public key, because I also have a public and private key pair. Grab my public key, encrypt your response with it, and then send it to me, and I use my private key to decrypt it. And actually, it's a bit simplified. That's how most of our e-commerce is done nowadays. Absolutely. Now, one implementation of PKI is what's called certificates. And they're used for a number of things. They're used to verify identity, which means, so when you go to Amazon.com, you know you're actually at the Amazon.com website and not Bob's fake Amazon website that he's using to steal your credit card information with. And they can be used to as a private public key pair to encrypt information. Now, there's really two types of certificates. You have self-signed, you have third-party signed. Certificates are all about trust. Right? You have to. The only reason it has any value whatsoever is that you trust who signed that certificate, who issued the certificate. Well, we can totally sign our own certificates. Windows allows us to do that. You can do that under Windows 7. I mean, it's a little MMC app snap-in you can do, and you can create certificates all day long. Thing is, who's going to trust them? Right? I can make my own certificate and publish it and go, there it is. You know, this is Husco, and I guarantee you it's Husco because I said it is. Well, who's going to believe me? Who's going to trust me? In the public realm like that, I would want a third-party certificate. So I'm going from a commercial entity, a company like Thought or VeriSign, or somebody who we trust because that's their business. Right, that's their whole industry, and you have to trust somebody. So you have your root certificate authorities, and then these organizations issue certificates to other organizations. Many times they're intermediate certificate authorities like GoDaddy, and then we as consumers buy the certificate from GoDaddy. So you have this chain of trust going on, and as long as that chain of trust is in place, then that certificate is trusted. Now, I'm not trying to slam self-signed certificates. They are useful, right? What about internally? You know, we want to have encrypted communication between our Sacramento and our Portland, Maine offices. Well, if we're the same company and we're the same IT department, we can buy out self-signed certificates. We issued them. We trust ourselves. No one else may trust us, but we trust ourselves. So for internal use like that, self-sign is just fine. If you're going out in the greater interweb, though, especially if you want people to send you stuff like credit card information, then you definitely need a third-party trusted certificate. So why do we even need to do this? What's the driving force? Well, basically, in many cases, it's the law. Privacy over time has become a much bigger deal, and there are laws in effect that govern this. Stuff like the Privacy Act of 1974, which started protecting people's Social Security numbers, for example. FERPA, the Education Rights and Privacy Act, the stuff that keeps your private education records from being spread around. HIPAA, the stuff that protects your health information. Sarbanes-Oxley, these tend to be used a lot in public utilities. If you're in a regulated industry like education or healthcare or utilities, something along those lines, by law, you have to comply with this stuff. And the liability for failing to do that can be huge. I mean, it can be business breaking, career ending. So a big part of information security is compliance, being able to understand these laws. These are people's full-time jobs in many organizations, is just being able to determine how to implement and stay compliant with this type of legislation. And this is just a few, right? Some stuff is regulated by law. Other things are just good practice. You start releasing private information on your customers, whether it's regulated or not. In most cases, it is nowadays by law. But even if it wasn't, you keep having data breaches and losing your customers' private information, it won't be long before you won't have customers anymore. So definitely kind of a big deal. And that wraps up our brief but very broad discussion on information. Again, this is why we have jobs. This is why people pay us. We can have the servers, we can have the elaborate environments, we can have the tricked out virtualization stuff, but if we can't deliver applications and those applications can't deliver or collect data in some form, there's not much of a reason for us to be there. So this is all good stuff. I will see you on next week's lecture.